So yeah, again, my name is Dave Ambrose, joining you from Michigan in the US. So today we'll talk about some of the technologies I'm using myself to build out Sitecore components from a design framework like Figma. I think a lot of us use Figma or maybe use Adobe, but a lot of us use Figma. So we'll be taking a look at that today. And we'll show you how to go from a Figma design to a testable Sitecore rendering in a matter of minutes, right? We'll accomplish all of that in this call. And something that, I would say on complex components is going to take you a couple hours usually. Find my slides. My apologies, too many monitors. There we go. Excuse me. So the problem and the solution, right? The current reality is that if we're going to make a new Sitecore component, like I said, it's going to take probably 2 hours at least, right? That's if everything goes smoothly. Like you're going to have to inspect the designs. You're going to have to hand code those templates in the content editor. Make sure everything gets transposed correctly. You're going to have to go create that component. And sometimes you might scaffold it, but you're still going to have to put all that work in. Go into Figma, figure out what those CSS values are. You're going to have to go create the rendering. If you're doing a solid job, you're going to have some tests, right? You're going to debug any mismatches you might have. And so all of those things that we might have done by hand, we have the opportunity now with MCP to have our AI tool, or whichever tool you want to use, that we can give it one prompt and then have it orchestrate all of those tools for you automatically. So you'll just review the result. Like you get the same output in minutes instead of hours. And I'm hoping, I don't have anything too structured today. It's a truly live demo where we'll just do it live. We'll see if everything works correctly. So fingers crossed on that. So what is MCP? If you're not familiar with it, we'll do a little bit of knowledge here. So before we get to the demo, AI assistants like Claude or GitHub Copilot are smart, but they don't have the access to your tools directly. So you end up having to copy paste your information either between Figma in your code or maybe Sitecore and you're working in content, in the CM, or however you're having to get all that information back and forth between your various sources. So MCP, which stands for Model Context Protocol, is an open standard that lets AI talk directly to your tools. So, right, like think of it as USB-C, where everyone has agreed on the language that this will communicate on. So now it's easier for people, if Copilot had their own language and Claude had their own language and Rue Code had theirs, we wouldn't get anywhere. So it was important for the industry to come together. I believe it was Anthropic that created the MCP protocol. And so now everyone's kind of following that protocol and they can build all the extensions that, again, will be good for whatever tool that you want to pick. And so how does it work, right? It's pretty simple, right? You're going to give whatever tool you're using a prompt describing what you want. And that tool is the one that decides which MCP server to use. So you don't have to say, I need you to go to this MCP server and call this function and be all that specific, right? That's not the goal of what we're trying to do here. The AI should be smart enough to look at that MCP server, list out all the tools that it has, and then orchestrate those tools in the way that makes sense, right? So that you're not doing the work of having to specify out, right? Then you're just running a macro, and we don't want to do that. Like you just describe what you want, and then AI figures out how to do it. So ideally, it should be that simple. We shouldn't have to give out too many complex sets of instructions. So let's just, I guess, look at an MCP server if you haven't. If you haven't actually looked at one before, there's this tool that I found online that I like, and it's just an MCP inspector. I think I have it up here somewhere. And what that tool is going to let you do is basically query an MCP server. Let's think of it that way. So I've got one up here. You guys can still see my screen, right? You're not just seeing the slides?
Yeah, we can see it.
Perfect. So I have a Sitecore solution running right now in Docker. And I also spun up this MCP server that's available online, Anton, and we can connect to that MCP server. So this isn't how you would typically work with an MCP server. You're going to have the AI do it. But if you needed to connect, I need to respin this up, my apologies. If you need to connect and kind of look at what those tools are, this is a tool that'll help you do that. So, I'm going to spin it up again. It's pretty easy to call up. It's just an npx command. Let me actually pull that up for you too. And I'll post all these links in the chat so that you can see those. But this is essentially the site that we're looking at. It's just a model context protocol inspector. And just gives you a way, right? There's different types of ways that you connect to an MCP server. And so this handles all those different ways. And then it gives you a way to look at those tools. You can look at what properties you might need to pass in and just kind of exercise the MCP server. Or if you created your own MCP server, which is pretty easy to do, you could also use this tool to help you debug your MCP server as well. So I like to think of MCP servers almost like an API wrapper, right? At the end of the day, you're still just calling a function somewhere. You're just giving AI the ability to know what all of those functions are, how to call them, and when to use them. So here, I'll hit connect. This should work now. Assuming my MCP server is working on the Sitecore server. There we go. So we're connected. We can see we connected. I can list resources. There's only one, it's config, but I can hit that and I can I'm getting a response, right? I'm getting data back. If I go to tools, I could list all the tools. So this is specific to just this Sitecore MCP server. And the Sitecore MCP server is really built out of three things. So there's the GraphQL part of it. So maybe I want to send a GraphQL query. There's the item service. So if you're familiar with the item service, all of those calls you get from the item service are also available here in this MCP server. So for example, if I wanted to do, get an item, right? And let me go find a GUID real quick. We could test this. I'll just grab a demo page, right? So if I said, for example, I've got this GUID, I'm going to plug that GUID into there and we'll see if the item service works. I'll run that, I get success, and I get all of the data that I would expect to get back from Sitecore. So that's just a nice way to test, like, is the communication layer working? Is my MCP server working? And it can start to give you an idea, too, of what's available. This is the Sitecore MCP server, like I said. Look how small this scroll bar is. Like, there's a ton of calls in here, right? So everything that you would have under the item service, and then it also goes into the PowerShell extensions. So pretty much anything that you could do in PowerShell, you could also start to do through here. So when you start to think about automation, right, like presentation details, like you could have AI add a rendering to a page. You could, and we'll get into that. We'll show us how to do that in a moment, right? It can make your templates for you. It could set the template on the rendering for you. It could go make a web page for you, put the rendering on it, create a content item for it, link that all together. So I've actually gone through workflows where I can create the template, create the rendering, put it on a page, have some test data, and I never actually logged into Sitecore. And that's all orchestrated through AI and the MCP server. So I encourage you to check out this tool. It's a fun one and give you a little background about MCP there. So yeah, I guess let's get into it. We'll do it live. I don't really have anything super prepared. I thought we would just do it on the fly. I've got some ideas about what we can do. I wanted to show you some things. Today we are going to talk about, I've got 4 main MCP servers that we're going to talk about today. So the first one, as we already went into, was the Sitecore MCP server. And so again, these are all available online. This is a standard. There's a site, I'll share the link later, where you can also browse all these MCP servers that are available. So we've got Sitecore covered. We're also going to talk about Figma, right? Because most of the time we're getting those designs. The first touch of the component is in Figma. We need to get those components out, get them into code. And then if you're a developer, right, it's nice to be able to test things. So we'll look briefly at like Chrome DevTools and Playwright. If you're not familiar with Playwright, that's like an automation tool. So, as you're writing these components, you could also have AI open up a browser for you, right? If you're going to have a component, let's say you're building a form component, Why not ask AI to have Playwright open the browser for you and write that automation testing for you, right? If I'm going to make a form and I'm as a developer, let's just do that testing right there, right? Playwright can let's open the web page, let's make sure the fields are on the page, let's tab through the components, let's hit enter and make sure validation shows up, right? All of those things that you can test automatically, you can have AI write those tests for you as well. Or maybe in Chrome DevTools, you're checking performance or looking at more specific things like that. So just a brief overview, this is really stored in JSON. I will be using Claude today as my tool of choice, but this could work in whatever your editor is, like Rue code, GitHub Copilot, anything that can take an MCP server. I know there's quite a few. So yeah, so let's start. How are we doing at 12:20? So let's go to Figma. I've got this sample. This is just like a free Figma you can download just so you can look at something. And so here we've got, I'm in Figma dev mode. You can't, in Figma, there's two types of MCP servers. If you're running Figma desktop and you have a dev seat, like I'm in dev mode right now, there is a local MCP server that's running. And so you can have that. We can see that up here, MCP server. It's running. I did have some session activity when I was testing it out about 45 minutes ago. And so, Figma has that direct connection to my AI through that MCP server. If you don't happen to have a dev seat or you don't have Figma installed locally on your workstation, you can use the online version. So they have two. I do happen to have them both here. Desktop gives you a couple other things. Like if I had something selected in desktop, I can ask for that. I can say, look at what I have selected in desktop, and AI can go figure that out. But maybe you want to use online, in which case, you could do that too. And you would just maybe send it a link to what you were looking for. So let's fire up Claude. I like Claude at the command line. I'm just a terminal guy. I don't know. I like it. It can get kind of messy, like literally on the screen. It looks a little weird at the moment. I don't love that. Let's close that. Let's fire that up again. It does get a little squirrely visually sometimes, but I think we're okay. So Claude's I've installed that with NPM globally, so I would have access to that wherever I am. And now this is a blank version of the Perficient website. It's a website that I had configured for this, so I kind of just blanked everything out, and essentially it's just a blank website that we're working with. And so we've got these installed. I've fired up Claude. I'm letting it sit for a minute because on the back end it's spinning up these connections to the MCP server, so I was kind of gonna let it go. If it had failed, it would have told us over here it would fail. So the fact that I don't see anything is great. And we'll check in on, right? So I can go /MCP, and then we'll start to look at what I have. So in Claude right now, I'm running Chrome DevTools, I'm connected. Figma Desktop, I'm connected. Figma Online, connected. Playwright, and Sitecore, local MCP server. All of our MCP servers are connected and we're working. So let's test it out, right? We could do a simple test. We could even, I guess, let's start. We're going to start with Figma, but we'll start with Sitecore because we're a Sitecore user group, right? So if I came in here and cross your fingers, the Shubrick, can you tell me about this, right? And that's all I'm going to say. I'm going to paste that in there. This is a page I've called demo, and we'll see what happens here, right? But a very generic request. Like I've just said, hey, tell me about this GUID. And so Claude starts to take that in and starts to think about, oh, okay, now it's actually using. See, I might have to ask for the MCP server here. It's not thinking MCP server. I should have said, can you tell me about this Sitecore GUID? That's probably what I should have said. See if we get a better response here. There we go. I'll query the Sitecore instance directly to get information about this GUID. So I went a little bit too generic on the first request. But we can see the Sitecore, or Claude found it, right? Claude found the item service get item MCP call. It looked through all of those tools and said, okay, if I'm trying to find information about a GUID, which of these tools is probably the right tool for me? I said, oh, probably this one from the item service. And so if we look here, it was able to go in there. It could get information about the page. It could tell me about the template. It could tell me about the path, or really anything about it. So even, I mean, that alone is super powerful, right? Like, think of how many times maybe you went and had to create a PowerShell script to go find all of the pages that were missing a page title, or something like that, right? Like the fact that you can have this new assistant go into your Sitecore and pretty much do anything that you could do manually. It's really powerful. So we know we're connected to Sitecore. That's cool. Let's see if we're connected to Figma. So again, I've selected this. We'll see if this works. This is just obviously a very simple component. I'll copy link to selection, but I don't know if you need to. We'll try the desktop one first. So in Figma desktop, can you tell me about the component I've selected? So again, Claude's going to take that request, start looking at what MCP servers it has available to it, sees the Figma desktop MCP server, says, okay, the first call I can make is get design context. I can go start to learn about what this thing is. And it starts to have this conversation with Figma, right? So I'm getting the design context. I was going to say next it's probably going to take a screenshot, which it did. So now it's got a visual of it, right? Now it can take the screenshot it just took and feed it into its own AI so it can actually see it. And so again, all we said was take a look at what I've selected in Figma and tell me about it. And now it knows everything about it, right? It's a text section, it's got a main heading, it says say knits, it knows about our fonts, our typography, our spacing, it knows about pretty much everything that there is to know because it has that direct connection into Figma. So, right, like ideally, we can see how fast we could do this. We need to take this component and get it into Sitecore as a rendering that we could put on a web page. And we probably could do it as a very long, like I could make a longer prompt to just have it do it. So I could just go walk away, have some lunch, come back in 15 minutes and I have a rendering. But we'll walk through it in little pieces and see how we might accomplish that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is build this component I'm running content SDK in this solution. So I want to build this thing as a content SDK component. So again, haven't tried this. Let's all cross our fingers together. And it knows what we're talking about. So let's please build out this Sitecore rendering and put it in this folder. I built a folder beforehand just so I knew it was there. So head apps, in my head app, Perficient site, sites, components, demo, and let's call this the demo component. I think that's good. I shouldn't even have to tell it content SDK. Let's just see what happens here. So yeah, I'll create a Sitecore rendering component for this design. Sure, it's gonna. I was thinking that's what it was gonna look like. It's gonna look at what patterns I'm already using in this code base. Plus, I do have some Claude files here. Like if you're using Claude, like you probably have a Claude Markdown file, which informs your AI about your project, right? Like what is this project? What is the framework we're working in? How do we typically name things? All of those things that you want to search for best practices. And if you were using GitHub Copilot, you'd have the same sort of thing, right? There's a I think it's .copilot or .github, and then you'd have custom instruction files that you would follow. And a lot of our projects that we're running now, we have both. And actually we have three. I've seen in one of our recent projects, right? Because not all developers want to use Claude. Not all developers want to use GitHub. So, it's all the same project, but you might have configurations for Claude, GitHub, and Windsurf. I've seen people using Windsurf lately. And so yeah, just depends on what tool you like. Is this builds? I guess I've been talking for a good minute now. I'll pause for any questions. I can't see any other screens, so I don't know if any hands are up or anything like that.
No, we have one from Anton, the creator of Sitecore MCP server. Can you show us the Claude.md? I'm interested in what you put in consistent cloud memory.
So happy you're here. Thank you for showing up. That's awesome. Yeah, let me see my Claude. Yeah, this is go here. Yeah, and this is a pretty new project, so we have not fully built this out. but yeah, content SDK, some coding standards. Like I said, what are our naming conventions, right? If I'm talking about variables, components, constants, directories, like let's all name things the same way, so we're not constantly renaming things and causing changes. Kind of where we're putting this, what libraries we're using, what best practices, um, some examples of how to create those components, Azure error handling, some configuration. This is a very new repo, so we have plenty of work to do on adding more stuff. I've seen a lot of best practices online too, um, that we're trying to pull in. I've seen some good sites that have that kind of stuff. So great question. Excuse me. Looks like we're done. So that took us 2 minutes and 30 seconds. All we did was select something in Figma, and we've got this here. So it created the demo component for us. It got the main component, did it all in TypeScript. It made our storybook file for us. I'm a big fan of storybook. Created the index for us. Again, made our fields for us. So we have fields, subheading, link. The design should match. Follows our code base patterns. And then next steps, right? Create that component map for Content SDK. Create the Sitecore template, right, with the 3 fields, heading, subheading, and link. Serialize the template, and then test in Storybook. And so real quickly, we'll show this. So here's our actual component. And so we've got our fields, and then the component below. We happen to be using Tailwind for in this project, so that's why it looks like Tailwind. So now we've got the component, right? We've burned 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Now we would say, okay, right, we need to get this thing into Sitecore. So let's just do that. We'll see how well this goes. So, okay, let's add this into Sitecore. Please create the rendering and the template with all of the fields. I shouldn't have to tell it to put I'm not even going to tell it to put the template on the rendering. It should already know how to do that. Let's see it. Let's just see if we can get that far. Very simple, right? We're not specifying much here. We just said, and it knows we just made this thing, right? It knows the context. Like it knows we just made the demo component. So it's like, sure, I'll go create the Sitecore rendering and the template with all the fields. Let me use the Sitecore local MCP server, right? Didn't have to tell it. It's figuring that out on its own. I didn't give it a path either. I just said, go make it somewhere. So I could have, but it knows enough too to say, okay, well, let's go find out where he's putting his other stuff, right? It's doing some queries here, like get item by path and look in the renderings folder. Look at the children of that folder, right? Where's the right place to put this rendering? I could tell it, but if it didn't, it still needs to figure that out on its own. And it's smart enough to use that MCP server to its full capabilities to do all of that work. So again, this is an amazing MCP server. All the applause in the world. At this point, right, I'm off. I'm in the kitchen making a cup of coffee. We're a minute and 4 seconds into this, so we've got a good chance at coming in under 5 minutes to go from a Figma design into a Sitecore component in 5 minutes instead of a few. Oh, it wants to know some GUIDs, it looks like. Any other questions as we wait?
One more, Dave. Is this the default content SDK, or did you make any changes to it?
No, not too much. I think this is only at 1.3.2. I saw 1.4.0 came out, I think. But yeah, I think we're at 1.3.2 right now.
Yeah, 1.4 came out this week, if I'm not mistaken, or the week before. Yeah.
I saw somebody post about that, which is cool.
Yeah, I got one more question for you, Dave.
Yeah.
Okay, so when leveraging AI and MCP for enterprise level Sitecore development, is there a risk of sensitive client data or proprietary code being sent out to external LLMs, like business logic or client-specific configs sitting on our local machines?
Great question. That's on slide 8, but I'll answer it now. No. At least for us, we're not concerned about it because with MCP servers, those are all running locally on your computer, right? Those aren't farming information out. So that's running on your local with your LLM. So certainly it might go somewhere else. Like if you're, let's say you're running the file system, right? And it might have, if you give it permission to go look elsewhere on your C drive, it's going to have permission to look on your C drive. But it's all going to flow through your LLM. So for us at Perficient, we use a company called Portkey, and Portkey is a AI gateway that is set up for enterprise organizations. So for us, even though I'm using Claude here, I'm not using like a public version of Claude. I'm using a version of Claude that is hitting our custom Perficient gateway, and then our models are in like AWS Bedrock, all again specifically secured to our company. I think I answered that question, or is there any follow up there?
If there is, I'll read to you here, Dave. But
Cool.
that makes sense.
Cool.
Yeah, he just said thanks for answering it. So yeah, you got it.
Okay. Awesome. Great question. It's a that's a top 5 question. So we're done. How long did we take? Too long. Let me see. Like our count. Oh, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So now we're right about 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes of total time. But what have we accomplished? So we've made a template, right? It went and made a template in the page content folder, which is perfect. It gave it a custom icon. A lot of developers forget to give their renderings a custom icon. Gave it a standard template, right? It didn't have to tell it about Sitecore. It knows what's going on. Created some fields for us. Created a demo folder template. It created the rendering for us, and it attached that, right? It set it made it editable. It set database query. The data source location should look for demo folder. And yeah, this is I'll pull that up here. It's tied directly to that template. So I didn't have to do that by hand. The MCP server did that for me. And then next steps, obviously, we could run it, we could look at it, and we could come up with all that stuff. So I'll pull that up over here just to prove that it wasn't just AI talking to us about it. If we go, I think it said here, feature, the other. And then here we have a template. Here's our template. It made the demo template. It gave us a heading, a subheading, and a link, all typed correctly. If we go back up to renderings, see if it put it in the same spot. I don't. Where did it tell it to? Where did it put the rendering? Yeah. That's the template. Oh yeah, Perficient public page content. And oh yeah, down here. And let's see if it actually attached the data source template. Perfect, right? Like the developer didn't have to come up with that source query or the data source location query and have it, or sometimes like a lot of people will just copy and paste it from the other, and then you're like, maybe you remember to change demo folder on one, but you didn't change it on the other one. Like just having this automated makes it more consistent as well, right? It's not only that it's saving your time, but if you have this, like this would be in your documentation, right? Like in your Claude file or in your custom GitHub instructions, like this is everything I expect you to do when you create a rendering. This is everything I expect you to do when you create a template. And if you define that once, that's going to be shared among your whole team. So pretty exciting. Let's see. I don't think it made us a page. We could ask it to. I mean, I think we've demonstrated pretty much anything that you can do in Sitecore, you would have the ability to do with this MCP server. So pretty exciting. I don't know that we need to do any more components. We'll go back into the slides for a moment. Take some more questions.
I do have one more question here for you, Dave.
Yeah.
What about like taking this approach and creating things like, for example, partials or even like for maybe a little bit of more complex implementation, like a search page where it's more than just a component. How do you personally see? I mean, are we able to use something like this to build those kind of things? Wanted to get your thoughts.
Anything that we could come up with, we could do. I guess let's keep going then. Let's push it, right? We didn't actually have a page, so let's. Oh, I made a page. I think I made this page. Yeah, because this was my page. But let's see if it can. Let's see if it can build out this page, right? Um, I have a test page here. Can you please add this rendering into that page? Let's also give it a custom data source, sample data, and link it to the render, right? So that would be something more advanced, like a user, right? I just built this component. I should have to put it on a page. I should have to demonstrate to the team that it works. So let's see what it does.
And
So
you
we're
were not
gonna,
lying
oh, go
when you
ahead.
said you were polite, right, Dave? You were not lying. You did that.
It's built into my, I've been typing for so long. I just don't know how to not say please. Yeah, I know. So yeah, so couple calls, item service get by header path, right? It's looking at the demo folder or the page. It's looking to see if there's a data folder under demo. It says, great, the folder exists. Now let me create a demo, or it says the page exists. Let me create one inside it, or maybe it looped itself. Yeah. Yeah, it called item service create item. It made a data folder under demo. It says, oh, look at it caught itself. It used a regular folder template, and then it was like, oh wait, I need to use the demo folder template that I made, not the demo template. That's funny. I saw it was really talking to me this weekend. Actually, this works. I created this, success, let me mark test 3 done. Now I need to add, is it still working? It says work for 51. Are you done? I think it's done. Oh, we broke it. Let me break. String should have at most 64 characters. I haven't seen that one before. So we broke it. I don't know how we can get back to conversation, but yeah, I think we broke that one. But yeah, I mean, if you let's see, you're telling me about the page designs and partial designs for the demo site. Getting back to what you were saying more, not just the web page, but like let's start talking about partials. Let's talk about page designs. Um, we'll see if I've permanently broken the session of Claude as well. I think I did. Yeah, I think this one bit the dust. That doesn't happen very often, but you know, they are computers. They do crash. There you go. For this new, for the Sitecore, give us some help. And let's see what it comes up with out of this one. Maybe it'll break it again. I'll help you explore the page designs and partial designs of the Sitecore demo site. Let me query the local Sitecore. So again, we're going to start at the top, right? List MCP resources is the first thing it's going to know because it needs to know what tools I have. It does say no resources found. I'm not sure why it says that. Yeah, it's going. Let me search for page designs and partials. Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, so we might have had an issue. Hold on. We might not have had our server up yet either. We should have checked that first. Go escape. So if we go MCP, yeah. So sometimes if your MCP servers aren't connected, and that happens, like when things come up, you might need to come in, reconnect them, and it kind of kickstarts that process. So now we're connected. So we simply, I should have checked before we sent off that call. Let's try that again. Now that that MCP server is available. Yeah. So now it's going to use the Sitecore local MCP server. Oh, it's using GraphQL now. That's good. Right. So now, like we'd seen it. Oh, I broke it. I have something broken. but it tried. It would have tried to execute the GraphQL there. Um, I'm not sure. I think I have the GraphQL playground set up on this site, but it's possible that I don't. Um, so I guess we will chalk this up to, I think I've broken my local a little bit. Not sure where this API error is coming from.
Yeah, I think Anton is actually saying here on the chat about the name being too long for Cloud Code, and that actually makes sense, right? Because if you look at the error message right there, it's just like the top
Mm-hmm.
64 characters. So that's the problem.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but that gives you guys the idea. All right, we'll kick it back to the slides. The demo went okay. So there we go. So, right, we've talked about like what it means to just make a component, but there's all sorts of other things we could do, right? Like content migration. Maybe you have to migrate a bunch of pages from one template type to another. You're changing, what renderings are on there, something like that. Like, have an MCP server start taking a look at that for you. Doing a component audit. Again, a lot of things that you might have written PowerShell scripts for before, you could just automate it, right? You can have essentially AI write that PowerShell script for you. Essentially, is kind of what it's doing, right? It knows all of that PowerShell that's available, and it's going to take advantage of that. Again, multi-site setup, you could do some stuff like that. I mean, it's design system updates. If someone goes in and updates your component, right? Very easy for you as a developer to go select that item in Figma, tell AI, hey, I'm working on this hero component. I see they changed these things over here. Can you update this component for me? And then actually have, the AI compare what the code is now to what's in Figma and have it do that work for you. So having AI, get into those tools is really a game changer. So right, how can you get started on MCPs? If it'll change. There we go. Um, right? So choose your tool, right? It doesn't have to be Claude. I love Claude, but not everybody does. So, maybe it's Claude Desktop, or maybe it's GitHub, or it's Cursor, or it's Windsurf. They're all great. I mean, right? They're all kind of doing the same thing. Some of them look a little nicer in a UI than others, but at the end of the day, they're all models. I don't have anything up here about Gemini, but the options are endless. Most tools now support MCP servers, so pick a tool. And then find your MCP server, right? That model context protocol.io, that's like the global registry for MCP servers. So you can go there and browse and find anything, right? There's so many. We talked about 4 today, and really we only talked about 2. We didn't really get into too much about Chrome DevTools or Playwright, but they deal with browser automation. But there's so many other ones out there, right? Like PostgreSQL database. Personally, I had a side project going that I wrote in Next.js, and so as I created that project and I wanted to deploy it to Vercel, I just installed the Vercel MCP server, and then that took care of it for me. Like, I think the only thing I had to do was give it a couple secrets, and it's writing the scripts for me. It's deploying to production, right? If there's a build issue, that Vercel MCP server will go look at the build logs, figure out what happened, tell my AI what happened, and then we fix it. But it's plugging in all of these different tools into your AI and then letting your AI orchestrate them all together. So definitely go look for some MCPs and build your own, right? Build your own MCP server. There's so much documentation out there. That's on my personal to-do list. I have not done it yet, but I would like to at least experiment so I have at least some sort of experience building an MCP server. And then, like I said, configure and go. We looked at that config file at the start of the presentation. It really is that easy, right? When you're pulling up some of these, all they really want to know is what are you trying to import? And because it has that global registry, it's almost like an npm package. You just have to add that, run it, imports it, and then you've got all the code. We got some questions, right? Does this replace developers? No. It replaces tedious tasks. You still own the architecture, you own the business logic, you still need to validate that everything matches the story that you were trying to accomplish, right? This is just, giving you power tools. If you had a handsaw before, I just gave you a cordless circular saw. So we're just gonna, instead of a hammer, you got a nail gun. So what's the learning curve, right? If you can use prompts, you can use MCP. There's nothing too complex that we looked at today that anyone couldn't do. If you can paste JSON, you can add MCP servers to your AI. Security, we already talked about that, right? That's all running locally. So as long as you're comfortable with your data going into the cloud, however you're connected, then that's fine. And you should be concerned about that. If you're just using a public open AI endpoint, you probably don't want to ship your customers' data up there, right? They probably didn't agree to that. Your lawyers probably didn't agree to that. That's probably a bad idea. And again, how do I debug when things go wrong? Use that inspector tool, right? It's really handy. Check your keys, check your connections. If you're in Claude, there's like a /doctor. It's usually trying to help you and give you some of that insight. And I guess that's it. Sorry, excuse me. Thank you so much for letting me present. I really appreciate that you all would take time out of your day to come listen to me drone on about AI and MCP servers. I love this stuff. So yeah, I was really happy to present. I've got my information up there. I am in Sitecore Slack. I should have posted that up here. So if you're in Sitecore Slack as well, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. But if you're in Sitecore Slack, I think my username is just Dave Ambrose. Feel free to reach out in Slack as well, and I'm happy to have any conversations there too. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, so I have one question here from Phil Harris. Do you mind spinning up Storybook? Curious to see how well the React component was made and how close it was to the design.
Sure. Let me stop sharing for a moment because there's things in that storybook I would not want to show you. But let me see if I can bring up that one component. Give me a moment. We can chat for a second if you want.